Right, this is another episode of the Best Damn League Show period with Not Dom, who this week is played by Not Dom, I Will Dominate, the famous streamer. And, well, here's the thing. I don't know whether to meme him and be like the fraudulent former pro player of Dignitas and, like Curse or whatever. But obviously, I actually think he was a pretty good jungler. And I have to say back then, it's not even just because he did content with me. I actually always did think the two underrated players in that region at jungle actually were him and Crumbs. People just, the problem is, as you well know, Jensen, no one knows what jungling about. No one understands pathing or knows what you have to also sort of know the dynamics of like how do they communicate with the lane and stuff. But if you know these things, then you can actually sometimes see people that might not have won the championship, but they were good. So obviously Jensen Goh is here for this episode. As I always point out, he technically at the moment doesn't do esports work, but spoiler, this episode, we're going to be dry roasting the whole European region. And I can tell you right now, I often point out in the past, some European and Western orgs have brought Jensen in right before big international tournaments like Worlds to help them prep, to scout the opponent, to figure things out. Spoiler, you all need him. You desperately need him. Like, there's a whole bunch of teams, I won't say which ones. Let's just say some of them might be like black and orange. Some of them might have, sort of like a pink. Maybe they're from around like the Belgian, Benelux area. I don't know, but all I'm going to say is some of you guys desperately need some like Jensen. So if so, hit the line. Also, he still has that Patreon with all that interesting info on it, doesn't it, from back in the day? So let's get into it, Jensen. Obviously, it's been a while. I just want to get the broad thoughts. Right now, are you someone, let's ask it this way. Were you someone who, throughout this year, you've probably seen, people don't just complain about the LEC format. A lot of people actually complain about LEC, the region, and they think it's bad, and it's been critiqued a lot. A lot of coaches, people like Dom are going to even quit viewing it, right? Were you already someone on that train? If not, has it changed? If so, does this final confirm anything? Where are you at on that one?
Well, I try to be someone who's more positive in general because it's very easy to sit there and then just
That's fair.
criticize people, right? So if I'm gonna look at where we were at the start, where the first time I came on at the start of the year, and I was assessing teams in terms of this is what we have, this is where teams have developed so far, and this is where it might end up. I was a little more positive with regards to that. But if we were to track the team's progress throughout the year, how much has the team really improved? Have they really looked at the weaknesses and short things up? Has this team moved up or down? I have to say that to reuse a meme all the way back from I believe it was season 4 or something like that. It's 10 years old at this point. It's a little bit of a worrying trend for the LEC
Oh,
region,
the balls,
where
the Worlds one,
yeah,
right? Okay.
right,
Jat, shout
yeah.
out
So
Jat one time.
it's so it's at this point it's a little bit of a worrying trend where I feel that the region is going through, perhaps it's due to the format or whatsoever reasons. One of the disadvantages when not being in the thick of things is that you don't hear the inside gossip as to who's meant to booming, who's rage quitting scrims and stuff like that. So this guesswork's coming up from a much larger, further away place, as all I can
Okay.
get is from interviews or whenever players go in euphoria and stuff like that. Maybe there's a disagreement amongst the team in terms of like what direction they should go, how they're adapting to the whole AP jungle meta and stuff like that. But it's quite clear that I think especially for Fnatic and especially for BDS, that they haven't really solidified like what is the team identity supposed to be and how they're supposed to execute the protocols around it accordingly.
Yeah, well, actually, what's fitting about that reference you give to the famous Jack comment about balls being in like whatever it was, I think we stuck in like Masters or something, or Diamond 2 or something ridiculous in Korean solo queue before that Worlds, was in some ways you could actually say balls was like the original Adam. Because if you remember, he used to be, everyone in the West knew this guy's like insane on Rumble. And then everyone would just give him it every game, and you were like, what is going on? Like, bro, it's like the one player that's like a master of that champion. So I actually do think he was slightly overrated, but I'll tell you what, he's really good on Rumble. Okay, speaking of people who got exposed, did he really? I don't know. I'll tell you what, Fnatic, they were showing their ass and they need to cover up. So this episode is brought to you by MeUndies. So if you think about it, summertime's here. Technically, the summer split has just ended in LEC, but that's not defined by when the summer is. The weather's heating up. Everyone's indoor playing games, watching games, consuming shows like this. And everyone's doing what? Sweating. Because that's what happens. If you're indoors, it's so warm outside. We don't all have aircon in Europe, do we? So it's not just Fnatic coaches sweating when their team has a lead and they know they will inevitably throw. So MeUndies has 10 different styles ranging from boxer briefs to jock straps. By the way, humanoid, you couldn't even carry Expecker's jock strap, but you can get your own jock strap from MeUndies, to special pouch underwear called Ball Caddy, which is an amusing name, but actually has a real purpose, which is it's basically designed so you can't have what they call bat winging, which is where you get one of your balls caught on part of the underwear. It's really uncomfortable and awkward. You don't have to worry about any of that. This has got special technology in there to stop you from doing that. I think metaphorically that would be like the BDS coaches trying to rein Adam's side laning in. That's not a bad reference. It's pretty decent, a little bit overextended, needed to keep it nice and comfy. In some ways, he needs a ball caddy, some would say. They have 100 different colours and prints. It's comfortable, it's breathable, it's stretchy. They've got the Move Me line, if you really care about that, which has Breathe Fabric, which is the best at moisture wicking and anti-odor technology. And you know what? If you don't like your first pair, they're on MeUndies. They'll just cover it themselves. So they basically guarantee you will enjoy it. If, as you see, the summer is here, be prepared with MeUndies. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com. It's on the screen there. /League Show. That's MeUndies.com/League Show for 20% off plus free shipping. MeUndies, comfort from the inside out. Now then, let's just start right at the top, Jensen. Because for this one, there was only 2 matches since before, and afterwards we can always talk about some of the other squads. I mean, there was technically 3. There was the Carmine Corp BDS one, but we'll skip that one for now. We'll do that later because there's some fun topics there. Let's go, obviously, the main topic is G2 played these 2 matches. They played BDS and they played Fnatic. I actually think, Jensen, before we go to the final, which has drawn all the ire and attention, what's crazy is, I think actually, for real, because everyone watched the BDS match before this final, I think it's actually the context of that BDS match which makes the Fnatic final so much worse, dude. Is that if you saw the BDS match, dude, BDS has got something wrong with their team because they did this last split. If you remember last split, they had Fnatic right on the ropes and then they basically just, in this analogy, let them get up off the ropes, beat them up and then win 3-2, if you remember. Like, dude, when BDS played this game against G2, it wasn't just the final, guys. BDS was leading too. They had chances to win. They also threw. I don't know that they threw as egregiously as Fnatic, but I think they also threw, dude. Like, they did a bunch of moves. And the reason why I bring this series up is because I actually think something happened to BDS this split, bro. Like, BDS before this particular split playoffs was quite a consistent team for me, and I sort of knew where the flaw was. I knew what things they'd do and wouldn't do. I knew that essentially like, a lot of the flaws would come from just individual play. Like the actual general team philosophy is pretty coherent. I always say I give them a lot of credit for how they coach, how they play. This playoffs, they were just whack the whole time to me. I'm actually sort of low-key impressed they finished 3rd, mate. Like, I feel like almost every series they were given so many big holes in their games. Let's start there. What do you think of BDS? I was kind of underwhelmed, bro. Like, when I saw how bad G2 was playing, I was thinking, bro, maybe this is the split where G2 gets beaten by Fnatic and BDS, and then the final's like a new champion, but apparently not. Apparently G2 wasn't any. What do you think about BDS here, mate?
Well, I mean, I want to give credit to Striker, right? Like, as much as I say that I felt that BDS never really came together in terms of team identity, regardless of that, this is a team that never had a good game and still made it to top 3.
That's
And I
actually
would
impressive,
say
isn't
that
it?
despite
Yeah.
never beating Fnatic,
Yeah.
this is a team that actually, I would even argue that they might look like two, depending on where your biases are in terms of how you evaluate teams. So I just want to give Striker and the coaching staff of this team credit, despite the very obvious flaw that they never really came
Yep.
together as a unit, or there's something that's very clearly fracturing them in terms of what is the mid-game identity is going to be. Because in terms of the basic protocols, in terms of the basic ideas of how to move around the map, execute things, extend the leads on side lanes, when to sneak the additional wave, this is a team that gets it, right? Has always been the two-lane team. And unfortunately, they go up against G2, which is stylistically, I would say, a very similar team, where they understand the importance of the integrity of the kill squad, and when do you collapse, when do you push through through mid, when you push through with the catch on the side lane and set up these traps over there. And I think that this is where BDS, I would just have to say that it's not the stylistic counter, but when you play the same style of game as somebody else, if they just have better quality than you, this is where you just end up suffering, right? So it is one thing to look at the early game, and if you are very used to watching a region like the LCK, where if you look at, okay, these are how these teams play, and if they're used to playing these mage supports, they get these leads early, and then the team that gets the lead through laning is going to convert that more often than not through having a very strong presence mid. But when you play this two-lane style of gameplay, the lane leads don't matter. How far you are ahead in terms of gold doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the game. It's really about who is able to manipulate the map and either get a catch in the side lane or push out the side lanes further, force a response from your opponent, and then force a manpower overload on the other side of the map, right? And within that, if there are some mistakes in your protocols in terms of how you connect your support and jungle together, where I would have to say Labrov has been one of the points where I feel that he has not really been connected with the rest of the BDS squad. In terms of the map movement, that's where they're getting picked apart by G2. As much as people are looking at G2 and saying that Mikyx is this engaged merchant and he's always going in and inting, a lot of those deaths are coming from the rather suspect laning phase that he has been a criminal in. But in the mid game, I have to say that his coordination with Yike has been a lot better as compared to what we saw from Fnatic and BDS or from Labroth and Shield, right? So this is where I feel that BDS, when they go up against G2 understands this style better than them. So unfortunately, I would have to say, despite the elite leads, it's a small little differences in terms of these protocols as to where they will fall behind. And I would have to say also that the quality difference, where we would see Adam and Nuke, this is where Caps, he feels like so a lot of people who watch Star Wars, right? There's the one good Star Wars movie in the past few years was Rogue One, right? And
Sure.
there's this character called Chirrut Îmwe, right? He's played by Donnie Yen. And I'm just gonna take this on a whole different segue, right? Where he plays this, where he's actually his claim to fame is from the movie Ip Man, where he plays this martial artist, and there's this scene where he fights off 10 people and stuff like that. And it feels like Caps in a lot of these games is exactly doing that. And I have to feel that the lack of quality in terms of individual solo laners to win these fights in the side lanes, right? When Caps calls their bluff and says that, okay, I believe that the rest of your team is recalled, I'm gonna send this pusher, or I'm gonna duel you to stop you from pushing this additional wave, and they lose the fight against him, is going up against a master of the martial arts. They just don't really compare. And I feel that when they get exposed in those scenarios, that's when their leads on the map starts to disappear, and it puts them into those uncomfortable positions where they now have to take a 5v5 against G2. And once again, you're losing the 1v1 because of quality. The 5v5s also, it doesn't help that the drafts are not necessarily giving them compositional advantages. A lot of times they're doing this Lucian to Corki, and if you have some insane mechanics in you, if you have the quality advantage over your opponent, which is what the LPL teams sometimes show, you can find a pick. You can instantly delete somebody, right? But sometimes if the skill shots are a little bit off, it's a little bit sloppy, you don't get a pick, and all of a sudden you don't have the Lucian ulti available, and the Corki is just bursting you down from range.
Yeah, the thing is, I actually think this BDS run, I'll actually pick up on something you said there, because it was a similar thought that I had. It's something I tweeted out many times during this playoff run. Is like, bro, if you look at it, I think you can actually make a case, like I just said. I don't think BDS played well in any of the series in the entire playoffs. But as you said, like, bro, they came third, and by the way, they weren't that far from making the final. Like, in a way that I've always said on this team, the main people I do tend to credit is the people like Striker and the coach and stuff. And this is why, because, bro, that actually for real is almost a miracle. Like, if you look in the history of League of Legends, the most obvious go-to excuse, which is a legit excuse for a coach, is my players played badly, or they played messy, or they didn't follow the game plan. Like, the amazing thing here is you never get someone say, we actually played really badly in all the series, but yeah, we almost fucked around and made the final. Like, what? Like, if anyone thinks of the first split of this year with Mad Lions, obviously they did have an insane globe. They were playing way better in the playoffs. Like, people like Frescova were having like the game of their lives at times to get them through those matches. BDS, I actually think, looked bad eye test-wise in every single series. They even had scenarios where, yeah, they'd like, obviously against everyone except G2, they did do a bit of the classic BDS, which is that it doesn't matter if you int or you're behind. Essentially, you just catch them at the right objective fight and you just set up better, you win better, you target select better. You know, all the things that we know from BDS, which is why, to bring it to this series, I do think it's really sad that they couldn't beat G2 here. Because already, they have an even worse scenario than Fnatic. Obviously, they have never beaten G2 in a series. So no one on their team right now can believe, even though I don't know that Fnatic believes it, but at least they did win that upper bracket best of 5. I don't know that BDS, I think they first of all have the psychological disadvantage. Like, they know that they're better players on G2. But also, the worst thing about having to play G2, if you're the guys from BDS, is, bro, they have, like you just said, they're probably the only team in the region that has not only like the toolkit to beat your style, they're just better at your style than you are, which is always the nightmare if people don't know. It's like that is always going to be the worst style. If you think about MMA, the best chance for an upset is when the guy has a different style to you. If we're both strikers and I'm the best striker and you're like a pretty good one, you're probably going to get knocked out because you're going to play my game that I want to play. Meanwhile, I could be the best striker, but if you're even just like a decent wrestler, maybe you can just win with wrestling. Maybe you just grapple and make the fight a messy ground fight, and that's how you win the battle. So the problem with BDS here is, not only did they play kind of shit, but bro, they can't catch a break. They can never get to play Fnatic. Like, for some reason, they're just always playing G2. Like, I actually think, as you saw in the last split, Fnatic is a team they actually potentially could beat. Maybe they could even do some of what G2 did and catch the throws and be in position, even though they haven't got players like Caps, true. Then if you look individually, I do think also, it's not just like the team collectively. I do think key individuals falling off, like you addressed, is why their styles look so much worse now. Like, the most obvious one is Labrov. Like, if people don't know, you have to go back to Winter and rewatch that split if you don't remember Labrov. Labrov, for real, was the best support, in my opinion, back then. I think he was like a real, like, you could have made him like an MVP candidate at that time. You know, he was really fucking good. He not only was doing all the superstar stuff people want, like player blitz or fucking thresh type, you know, hook champion, and he was mega with those, by the way. Like, his catches not even in lane, out in the mid game, his catches were like, they would just win your team fights, just win your and by the way, make fights not even have that. You kill the first guy, just do a skirmish, catch the first guy, they have to back off. He was mega. He did sadly though each split drop off a little bit, and by this split, I think this whole split he's been a bit sus actually. Like, actually, it's not doing a lot of that shit that really is showing you. Like, BDS looks way more mortal when he's not doing all that stuff, mate. And I also think as well, like, because I always say the most underrated player in this team is Ice. I think that guy dude, he actually is like the meme of like the Korean that people think of from like StarCraft, like the faceless Korean. No one knows this guy. He even has the most generic name ever. But fucking hell, is he good? He just goes in the game and just plays. It's like he's playing in solo queue or something. No matter what the game state is, this guy just performs at like a perfect 7.5 out of 10 every game, I feel like. What do you think of because I feel like the bot lane dynamic is a big change for me in this team. What do you think? Because on the one hand, I have to give Ice props, but I also do think they had a hard time because that bot lane isn't as strong as it was before.
I mean, with regards to Labrov, right, my criticism comes to him in terms of his overall team cohesion. I think his mechanical play, especially in the early start, he was playing very well mechanically on those champions, right? But if this is a team that makes its bread by being able to be cohesive as a unit, and Labrov is not on the same page as the rest of the team, and there's some just very strange fights that they're looking for, like the one where the Renekton's TPing behind the rest of the team.
Right.
I think there's like one where they're just running up and hitting mid lane while they're behind on the map and they're playing 1-3-1 and three people are trying to rush the mid lane turret. There's a lot of strange decisions happening over there. But to get back on topic with regards to Ice, I think that he's definitely been solid. I used to use this description about Exekik, right? He's not in my books in terms of like this guy's amazing. He's not in my books in terms of like this guy's inting. He gets the job done, and that's kind of just what BDS wants as a whole, right? If this is their market in terms of GMing, where we look for the 7.5 players that can be molded around the team, then they've found the perfect target for them.
No, that's one thing I always say. That's an example where I'm totally happy to say they were right and I was wrong. They essentially suggested when they got Ice, we don't need crown shot. In fact, the things outside of the game that you don't see, like his attitude or how much he was on, that's the problem. And I used to think, yeah, but beggars can't be choosers. Like, you don't have an option to get a player that has all of that, but then doesn't have the attitude. Turned out they did. Amazingly, they did. Like, it actually somehow found. Look, I still think Crownie maybe has a slightly higher ceiling because he is like the ego carry. You give me everything. But I'll tell you what, if you take that out of the equation, Ice can do basically like 95% of what Crownie did, but apparently without any attitude. He's just a Korean guy who sits down and plays bloody games. Like, he's a fucking killer. And then the last one is obviously this team, in terms of both drama but also their style, they will always be defined by how Adam plays. Because as I've always pointed out a million times over, I do not believe Adam is ever really sat down like, yes, Striker, together we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. Finally, like, he would play the same way in Mad Lions or a fucking team in Turkey in the TCL as he would in this game against this team with this game plan. So what I think you've seen this split is when other elements of the team have broken down a bit, you've seen the really up and down Adam that he used to be before they got everything really tightened up at the beginning of the year. Like, think about it, right? Yeah, he has games he carries and he has games where he dominates even. But man, it feels like at the moment is really good games. Like, I feel like 1 out of every 3 games he has a good game. And the problem here is this, Jensen, this is the thing I always have to nail with Adam, is his bad game. I don't think he could tell you if I paused it 8 minutes into each laning phase, is this going to be your good game, Adam, or your bad game? Because basically, I think his bad games are just what he does anyway on the good game, but he just gets caught, he overextends, he doesn't understand when they group, he fucks up, gets caught by someone in a brush, for example, he thinks he's stronger than he is. Like, what's funny about Adam in many ways is, I feel like he is one of those players where, I know we've had a few players in EU that were like the self-mades, an example. They're players where they almost play pro like it is solo queue pro. Like, sometimes you wonder, like, What was the game plan? You're just doing what you want in the game now. It looks like you're just playing for fun almost. What do you think of the Adam factor? Because it's always going to be the interesting discussion about this team.
It's always very interesting, right? Because I as a coach, even I would always value players like Adam because they bring an X factor to a team, and it's one of those what I call it promotes creativity through restriction,
Right.
because you know that this player is going to play in a particular way, so it informs them, and it so happens that Adam's play style it forces BDS to have built the identity and built the way that they play into this two lane, at least in the past, in this very heavily towards two lane where they would actively sack one lane and then play into a side lane or play through mid into a side or play side into mid very actively on the map. And it will force players to group together, be very active in terms of enforcing one portion of the map. And it so happened to be what I thought was the correct way to play the modern game of League of Legends, right? So I I always think that this is something that BDS is Adam, right? At this point. Adam's been
Yeah,
so long
I
on the
agree.
team, and I feel that this identity is something that's hard for them to move away from. Now, the question is that if you're going to be playing this two-lane style, so to bring back the Crowley conversation, yes, Ice is good, right? If this is what they're looking for, if BDS is happy, consistently finishing below G2 every split. And then if so happens that G2 gets upset along the way, it means that BDS would then get knocked on the lower bracket by G2, and they would never have the chance to even contest for second, right? But if the question here is how can G2, how can BDS potentially contest for first place? They definitely need a big ego back on the team, right?
Ooh,
Maybe that
okay.
means bringing back Crown Shot. Maybe that means, hey, maybe upsets available for
Maybe
next
they
year.
get the real upset. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you're a player to bring in right now, right?
hmm And that's the type of thing that two lane playing on two lanes and farming a carry, that's one of the that's very effective way of farming all the resources
Sure.
into someone who I think has the mechanical competency to not get out dueled by caps on the side lane, right? Who's not going to get surprised. The solution is the corking in the side lane and you get one shot the solution and stuff like that. I mean, of course, this is me
No, I know what you mean.
thinking about the
Yeah.
situation when Nuke got caught up in the bot lane, right? Where they need the quality of players to be able to find and win those deals. And I think that that's where they're lacking at the moment. And if PDS wants to find anything more than that domestic success, and don't get me wrong, domestic success, especially in the League of Legends calendar is already a lot. This is something that they need to think about, right? Who's going to be the other star of the team, and what's going to be the complementary piece to its setup.
I know what you mean. Like basically, it's funny. Even though I gave that compliment about Ice being one less ego, I'm saying that in the context of what the coaching staff say they wanted. Like they basically say their biggest problem with Crown Shot was the idea you had to give him all the resources because he was the kind of guy who just demanded it. Basically, he's like the player that demands the ball all the time. And in this analogy, they obviously wanted him to do other things. Is that what they were trying to say? But this is actually one area where I actually agree with you in the sense that I think coaching staff sometimes can actually essentially like you in the same way as Adam causes the restriction from which you have to do clever things elsewhere on the map as BDS. I also think having big ego carries also will force coaching staff to have to change what they do, sometimes in a way they might not want to, but is more beneficial, like we're saying, because the obvious angle if you play G2 is they're too good at the things that you're actually strong at, so it removes your strength, and then you don't have the raw knockout power that even Fnatic has, where at least they have a humanoid and a Razork and players that can actually do something in the game. So I agree with you. In a weird way, I think the coaching staff got too much of what they wanted, and they don't realise that, like, as brilliant as it is when everything looks good, I mean, the joke is you don't even have to make it about G2. You can make it about G2 now, but the bigger problem for them is internationally. I think if they go international, they're going to have the same problem as last Worlds. They're going to get embarrassed a lot. And by the way, any Asian team is going to absolutely wreck them, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to have any chance against any LPL or LCK team. So the reason why I bring that up is you would think naively, well, the obvious ego in this team is Adam, right? I mean, by the way, that's also supposedly the reason Crowny had to go. It sort of became internally Crown Shot or Adam. And spoiler, I'm with you. Like, they've pretty much committed in this squad. The team is Adam. It's his team. It's Adam's team. And the question is just who plays them and how do they play around him. It's almost even that part of the charm, even though I think he's a bit of a dick. And I do think as a player he's interesting. He has that idiosyncratic style. So even though obviously he has his own ego, I mean, the joke is, remember, he was benched earlier in the fucking playoffs in winter. And it's just clear from his interviews he's got a massive ego. The difference is, though, it's about where the ego is attached. The problem here is this. I don't hate Adam having an ego, right? But he isn't the ego we're talking about here, Jensen, because he's the player. I agree with you. I see Adam if I'm being generous, as like a Bwipo-esque character, where it's like they will in and they will have games that look shit, but also sometimes on the game that looks shit, they'll turn it around and actually be good in that one, surprise you, and then essentially they're the wild card. The key thing is they constantly keep the enemy on their toes, and then the enemy does things like target them, thinking they're going to int, or tries to figure out what they're doing. And I think actually they just essentially distract your enemy. They keep them running after their own tail all the time in the game. But the difference is when we say a big ego, that's why you say someone like an upset. The difference is when someone like Crownie has a big ego, they're not that up and down as players. They're like consistent carries. Like the reason I want my carry to have an ego, and this is where maybe Ice isn't as good as I would want, is I don't think Ice is going to do the thing that Upset and Crownie definitely would do, which is like, right, everyone just forget that, just group now with me. Like we can get a fight here, and like essentially I've got my items, I can carry. Like that's what you sometimes want that carry to say. And Adam just isn't that player. Like you can see he even has a sort of very individualistic style with how he side lanes and goes off, and he's always playing away from the other parts of the team, it feels like. So no, I know what you mean. Like I actually feel like that's the obvious upgrade, is if you could just get one, because Nuke and Shio clearly don't have the big ego. Labrov's just an unusual cat, doesn't, to me, seems like someone's a bit reserved, but just I see him as sort of like the genius anime archetype. I agree with you. If it's not Crownie, there are other big name people we can get for this role. Like spoiler, ADC's not that hard to get a big ego for. They are the fucker that's just like daughter, like, I'll be the carry, just give me all the farm. No, I'm with you. What about if right, let's just do it then. Let's just do the G2 topic. Obviously, it's going to probably be impossible in this conversation to not talk about Fnatic and G2 at the same time because of how that final went. But I'll start on the G2 end. The other reason I think this final is so fucking bad, like, put it this way, there was a question at the end of Summoning Insight, and I always make this point, as I did on the show, that when people ask questions, which are great questions, by the way, the problem is the format of it being a question thrown to me 3 hours into Summoning Insight at the end of the show is I haven't got time to sit down and spend an hour thinking about like some really deep historical question. Like, is this the greatest throw of all time? Like, bro, I'd need hours to figure that out. I'd have to go back in history. But when I thought it through, I actually think that final is the biggest throw in the history of esports. I'm not even trolling. Because if you add every factor goes against it being not a throw. As in, like, before you even get into the Fnatic stuff, which is pretty bad, like leading in every game, lost every game, like fucking crazy leads that can't be lost, don't even need to fight, can do there's all the factors we'll get to in a minute. But I actually think on the G2 side, the most damning thing is this. Bro, I don't even think G2 played well. I think most G2 players actually played fucking bad on this weekend, including in the final. Like, essentially, it's almost fine. Aside from Caps, and even Caps wasn't the peak Caps he's been most of the year. Aside from Caps, most of the players, it's like you did there. It's like you have to, like, acknowledge they fucked up in this way, but then they sort of were better than you think in that way. Like, nobody looked good. Like, I would understand if this is the G2 of some of the past splits where they blow you out the water, they look awesome, or Caps is just too good. You know, we do that thing after every final. How can anyone beat Caps? He's like the fucking Kwisatz Haderach of LEC. That's not even what this episode's going to be about, guys. This episode, absolutely, for both BDS and Fnatic, G2 was almost like just fucking like after you, like polite, like you can win the match, I'll come second. Like this is crazy. This is one of the craziest ones ever, because when I look at the G2 roster, I always say I actually think normally the unfair advantage for G2 is they have way too good a roster. Almost every player is a real contender for best in their role. And then secondly, because of that, they normally have an insane draft kingdom. Bro, their drafting is sketchy as fuck this right now. And actually most of the players weren't even that good. Like, what do you think on that? I was kind of shocked how bad G2 was, because they're the champions now.
So one of the things that I did was when you compare the first series, right, where they lost to Fnatic, and then they looked at the second series where G2 won. They lost the first series because they had to play the proactive comms, and it was them who was then making the mistakes and failing to convert not this big lead, but they were not able to convert the leads and the map presence that they had, right? They're trying to twist the fate up. It was them was on the Renekton and stuff like that, which means that you have to be the one who's proactively on the map, snowballing the game, and the onus is on you to close things out accordingly. Whereas this time in the finals, they went for the Corki blind, so that the opponents would be going Lucian into them. They were going for the Ornn into Renekton matchup. They opted into that every game. And I have to say that the lead should not have been that bad, should not have been that big from Fnatic, because it's almost ridiculous, right? The fact that you lose to June hitting level 2 on Leona in the second game, and then you die to the exact same thing in the third game as well.
Yeah.
I think that's low key just criminal, right? But what's interesting is it's always fun to think about is what must be happening in scrims for you to get to this point? Did they really look at this and say that looked at the way that Fnatic plays and say that they have all these holes in the mid game. As long as we pick a comp to scale, this team is never going to be able to close things out. And then they went for the strategy that they did, repeatedly opting into those options, which definitely paid off, right? If it definitely was a little bit exaggerated, but if that was their read and they watched back the tape and say that, okay, why is it that we have to put the burden on ourselves to win the finals when we can ask, pose the question to Fnatic, and we know that they definitely do not have the answer. So sure, we give them the Renekton, we give them the Lucian, and then the hope that they, or not hope, but we know that they cannot close out given these compositions. And despite the goal leads that they have, we execute, we overload on sides, they defend ourselves, we know that the resets are sus, so we're going to try to punish that as much as we can, and then claw away back from a deficit. I don't think they were expecting the deficit to be that big. I think that they were definitely more than prepared to be taking games from a deficit.
One thing I'll ask on what you just said there is on Summoning Insight, I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion where Monty said that classic topic, but it's come round again. He thinks actually Renekton is mega over-indexed in all these drafts. Like, if you look at the drafts, especially in like Europe, bro, everyone seems to think it's like the ultimate champion. Like, if people know the history of the champion Renekton, it's one of the most notorious like scrim stompers where it just wins the first like 10, 15 minutes. And then if you don't know, the problem with scrim culture in the West is you tend to just quit the scrim if you're getting super shit on. So that's why famously the best example is someone like the player Bo from Jungle. It's not a joke. Those stories are true that he like mega wrecked all the scrims, but you can see why he didn't win any LEC games, because in an LEC game you still have to play out the game and close it, and he wasn't that great at late game macro, if you notice. So essentially I think there's a comparison to be brought here, right, Jensen, because you saw in this final Fnatic just has it in their head that like Renekton is the shit, like they just want it all the time. But I actually think this final shows what Monty meant. Like, they had their leads, they were fed, but they could never do anything with this fucking champion and end the game. Like, if anything, it actually became like a liability at some point in time. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Renekton has always had a very bad rap, right? It's one of those things where it's criticized as this champion that falls off in the later stages of the game. And I think that it saw some redemption when people start to flex it mid for a certain period of time. Then it gained this duality, right? In terms of its flexibility in terms of the roles that it could be played in. So when people go for Renekton, what they are trying to go for is they're picking up, they're trading out scaling and stats, right, in exchange for agency, because the empowered W, which is the stun, is so
Yep.
long, it guarantees so many setups, and it's
Yes.
actually very good when you're playing a two-lane pick composition, right? Which is not the type of style that Fnatic likes to play. But if you're trying to play and repeatedly dive someone on the side lane, especially with AP junglers, which has always been a very classic pairing with Renekton, be it Nidalee or now with the Brand and Zyra, it's almost a true setup into whatever burst combo that's coming through from the AP mage. And that's probably why people are indexing hard into it, where they get these AP mages fat and ahead in the game. I think we saw that with some of, I think it was BDS's games as well with the Talia. That was one of those things that I recall used to terrorize scrims as well, right? Renekton Nidalee, Renekton Talia. They would just pick these champions, the game would be over in 7 minutes because people would just quit because the top lane had died 4 times to the combo. And the problem is that the champion has got no multiplicative stats, right? So it's not like any of the tank champions where you gain this utility in the later stages of the game, and your utility as the game progresses is whenever you're flash active, you charge up enough rage, and then you go in on a flashless AD carry. So how you manage your flash and your ability to go in there to pick off AD carry in a key team fight is going to be the key factor in terms of how you use Renekton. And other than that, he also serves as a strong duelist on the side lane. Problem with being a strong duelist on the side lane is that currently the meta is all about these AD carries mid with a lot of mobility already. So you don't have the natural tanky stats where if you see one of these AD carries hitting the Ornn, you're just kind of tickling them. But the AD carry starts to wail on you, right? And if you E towards him and they have the dash, they time it properly so that you don't get into range of your stun, then you end up in a whole world of hurt. So he no longer fulfills that role as a duelist in the side lane where he's able to generate the side lane pressure as well. Yes, he can create some creative cheeses by sitting in bushes. And then once again, I would say it's also a little bit flash reliant for you to go in there and then do that. If you use the flash for that, you then don't have the flash available for the team fight, right? So this is the kind of the flaw of the problem of Renekton in this current meta. Whereas compared to when you're playing in a mage meta, the mages are a little bit weaker in terms of side laning, and then the Renekton, if you can find a mage on the
Yes.
side lane, then that's the one shot, right?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious angle, we can get to this a bit later. It's actually one of the reasons I also think LEC looks really bad. Is LEC as a region is the one that looks terrible when you put ADCs all over the fucking map. Like, when you have 4 to 5 ADCs in a game, we're not, like, our regions can't handle infinite damage going in on the fight. Like, everyone's lost. So, no, I know what you mean. And that's also, to me, why it's so inappropriate right now. Because if you look at the fucking comps that you're playing against, as you say, first of all, this isn't the time when the Renekton's going to be the side lane god. There's just going to be some stud mid laner with 7 kills comes and just fucking wrecks you with 2 items. Like, you're never going to win that fight. And then secondly, just look at the draft for game 1 of this final and you'll see why some of these Renekton picks are mad egregious. So think about this pick, right? So Oscaradin has the Renekton here, guys, and he's playing into Kennen. The jungle on the other team is Sejuani. Mid lane is Corki. Bot lane is Ezreal and Poppy. So think about those 5 champions, right? If he goes to Kennen, Kennen already has an escape. Yike has the fucking easiest CC of all time to land when the Renekton comes in with that flash fucking E or whatever. Like, when he comes in like that, you're just going to instantly throw that ult in his face. It's going to be so easy, and you're dead instantly, by the way. Corki can obviously just jump away. Ezreal can just move away, and the fucking Poppy can just hit you over the other side of the map. Like, if you're the Ezreal, no, if you're the Renekton, because remember, you have to put yourself in the perspective, guys, here of the top laner. Imagine in your solo queue game, you're trying to get off, like, either the most amazing, like, flash engage, or you're going to do the flank, right? How are you ever going to get to any of the targets here? How are you ever going to get to, like, Caps or fucking Hansama? You're never going to. It's like, unfortunately, like, they have all the tools in the world to just fucking wreck you. So that's not, look, that's only a very minor issue with this final, but I thought we should do some, like, real, like, draft analysis before we get into the bigger picture stuff. Because, bro, one of the most criminal things about this final for me is I can't believe that Fnatic had those types of leads, though. Like, this is where I've always thought the most overrated stat in League is the gold advantage, because it brought, ever since we got out of, like, 2013, the question always becomes, but where is the gold? Not how much gold is there? Like, yeah, if you go back to, like, 2012 and 2013 when people played very basic win lane, win game, and just group a team fight and fight around Dragon and Baron, the most easy version of League of Legends ever, yeah, back then, raw, like, I mean, even used to just be 5k. 5k gold advantage is very hard to overcome in that meta. Like, you almost certainly win the game off that. But if you look in the modern day, my questions are always things like, where are the kills? What items were you able to buy with those things? Do you have the power spike yet, etc.? So sometimes you can have that, like, 3k gold lead that's not a real lead yet, or it's not actually, there's the other way to say it, it's a lead, but it's only on the scoreboard. It hasn't yet affected you in the game. It's not actually making them beat you. Bro, the leads they had, Fnatic, in these games, they were crazy leads. Like, they had the leads where you have exactly the players you want fed, your whole team's ahead, their key carries don't even have the kills, and you essentially have map control. Like, you can just choose to take the objective fight or do the fight. You can just, but bizarrely, I always think this is how you know Fnatic must be mindfucked against G2. Even when they had all of those win conditions, I've just described all those strengths to have in a game, they almost played like they were the team behind Jensen. Like, they would accept, like, a stupid 5v5 fight in the middle of nowhere, like, or they would take a fight when you could have just gone and taken, like, a Soul or a fucking Baron or something. This is the most weird thing of all to me, is like, it's almost like they just misplayed completely what their comp was or their winning situation. Give me some thoughts. Like I say, I've almost never seen a throw this bad, bro, because it's almost like they sabotaged themselves. Like I said, I don't even feel like G2 forced them to lose these games. What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of okay. So let's try to break it down first, right? Like, converting map control leads into wins is, I don't think that that's ever been Fnatic's strength. Right? This
Sure.
has always
Yeah,
been a
yeah.
team that's been about using player quality to beat people over the head with, and it's usually around the mid lane and in team fighting. So I think that there was a lot of to put some positivity into this. I think that there was a lot of very creative use of tactics that G2 was using. So they identified
Okay.
that Oscar was going to be the one who's trying to sneak out the waves, and I think they caught him once out around the bot lane bush, and then that helped them stabilize the map quite a fair
Okay.
bit. There was all these camps on the side lanes. I think that they picked up Humanoid Solution once as well using that. So there was a lot of good tactics coming through from G2, right? And this is where G2 has always been the master of their craft, right? And this is even back to the old G2 lineup. This is where they made their bread and butter, when they were doing this against the likes of T1 and Dumb Gaming all the way back in 2019, right? Where they would fall behind and they knew how to overload your sides, find these creative picks around the side lanes, and then give up map control for a gambit to sit in the bush, pick up somebody to then regain even more map control in those scenarios. So to get back to my point with regards to Fnatic, so I think that it's one of those where there's definitely has to be a certain sense of frustration, right? from their perspective, where it feels like we're not being able to make progress on the side lanes. So in fact, they even did pick off, they did pull off some creative picks at some points of time. But it's quite clear to me that the protocols in terms of how do you create the signs of that to replicate that consistently wasn't necessarily there. And if your experience throughout the entire split has been beating people over the head in mid lane, and that's where they found the most of their success, then that's what I think they're going to try to default to, right? Especially if they have the likes of the Zyra, if they have the likes of what they feel is a range advantage, then they can try to hold that against G2 and then try to beat them in a 5v5 fight in those scenarios.
Yeah, I have to say, one player that I'm going to pick out from Fnatic to highlight isn't even going to be the usual cast. Since I normally rave about Razork. I actually do think, I always say, I think Razork is actually the second best player in the whole LEC. I think Caps is first, but after that, I would pick Razork. If we're doing a draft, you take Caps, I'll take Razork second. You can have whoever you want third. Like, I actually think that would be the best choice. I think he's that good. And I think this year, he's actually been really fucking good. Like, yeah, he had the odd playoff game where he let them down. By the way, their team in general has been a nightmare up and down in playoffs throughout the year. But here's the problem. In this final, I think also he played really badly. Like in all contexts. Like he did have leads, which normally I would expect him to close out. Like he's normally at the tip of the spear. Secondly, bro, he had all the mega strong meta champions. He had 2 Zyras and a Brand. If you don't know, guys, these champions fucking dominate if you're a really good jungler right now. Like you can do so much with these. So he also had the picks. It's not like he was like denied his picks or they picked like 4 things, like people gave him actually powerful tools. And then lastly, I do just feel like even when Razork's really good, I can sort of forgive when he makes a mistake because he's one of those people on that like Yamato kind of, proactivity versus precision thing where he clearly goes for loads of proactivity, doesn't he? Tries to have loads of moves. But, so I can forgive the odd mistake because essentially that premise goes, you're not going to be as precise, it's not execution as much. His execution was crap in this one. What did you think of that angle, the Razork thing? Because if they'd have won, I was going to big him up. I was like, wow, he won with such a bad team and he's so insane, but he didn't. He actually was one of the problems in the game for me.
Stuff was fine. I don't think it was a particularly big issue because my analysis of the game really came down to a difference in tactics and the decisions to fight. And the criminals in those fights were, I think the big one that comes to mind was Noah. I
Of
think the
course.
Razork, there were some small mechanical mistakes, but if we are trying to nitpick, there were some very egregious mistakes from both teams in that one, right?
Sure.
Probably contributing to why so many people pen the finals as a whole, right? But I think that this is what happens when you have a high level of activity and just teams just going at it and trying to abuse differences in flash windows across the board. Where this is one of the things that I think people don't talk about enough when they look at junglers, right? Where what you have is what we call match versus mismatch jungle potting, where if both junglers path down in the same direction, that's what we call match jungle potting. Usually you have a lower level of activity unless you are both putting towards what's seen as a high volatility lane, which is actually what happened in game 3 of the series, where the Leona against it was Astral Leona against Kai'Sa Nautilus. Then they got a solo kill in the early levels, and all of a sudden the junglers are going to be appearing in the same places at the same time, with supports that can enable fights from both junglers rather easily and increase this high level volatility, right? And there's these sort of situations where it's very hard to make a judgment and it's easy to criticize, right, when you see that people mess up the fights and stuff
Sure.
like that, but it's hard. It's This is why jungling is such a tough role. It's very easy to look at it and say that, okay, in theory, this is where the wave state should be, this is what's supposed to be happening, but now that one side has got a kill, right, the opponent support has reset, they're running out through mid, you know that there's going to be all this information that's available to you, and it's different from what should be a default standard game, right? Or in chess they call it a theory game, right? That has been thrown out the window. We're in new territory altogether. You have to reinvent how you're going to be playing and adapting to the situation at hand. You need to have a very good read as to what the game state is going to be. And I don't have a lot of fault as to how Razork played that, at least in the earlier stages of the game. And when it comes to the mid game in terms of his execution, um, prioritizing the objectives was mostly fine. It's really just how the team moved around the map and their choice to push mid when they shouldn't be pushing mid, their inability to defend the side lanes, and how they got picked off in some of those scenarios where they would split 2-1-2, even sometimes in those scenarios where I think that that's where I'm not even sure where the source of those calls are coming from. Is this still a team that is dominated by Humanoid or Razork in terms of the calling in the mid game, or is this something more of like June taking over? what has the process been like? And that's where my brain goes to when I try to break down how exactly did this team fall apart in the mid game, and why is it that they're not able to convert on these leads?
No, that's fair enough. What about one thing I did want to ask about, because I do think this is insane, is it's funny that everyone is now on the like fuck Noah train and they all hate him and think he's trash, he should be out for that all the time. Because what's hilarious is if you ever go and look, he almost did the reckless completely. Like he did the thing where the actual box scores look totally fine. If you actually looked at the box score, you would actually, your initial assumption would be he must have played well and the rest of the team should have been like, I would say about like upsetting Carmine Corp or something, you know, like, but I have to say, if you ever watch him in these games, bro, first of all, here's where he did not do the reckless. Reckless doesn't just play like Ezreal and just get caught right out in the open and lose the whole game. Like, the fuck? If anything, when I criticise Reckless, it would be like he was too passive, he stepped back, he didn't go for the extra kick, he wouldn't flash in, he wouldn't... Like, put it this way, the reason why Reckless's whole gameplay went away is because he, in an era where you can flash and Gale Force, he's a totally inappropriate ADC. Like, that's not his style. Bro, Noah, like, simultaneously, like, made missteps and died, and then also had the fights where he just wasn't doing anything. It's like, bro, you're all the kills, everything's on you. Like, basically, in this scenario, this isn't like when Flackard used to play for G2, and everyone used to hate on him, but he was clearly like the tertiary carry. Like, he wasn't even given the picks or the fucking resources. They had the resources in this guy. Like, this guy, if you were, the obvious angle a lot of people have said, but I just start thinking of how many ADCs in this league would carry these games given that lead. I think there's a lot. I'm not going to say like it's an awesome league for ADCs, but you know what? As much as I might criticize someone like Super from Mad Lions, bro, he would carry these games. If you put him into, like, if you pause at that, like, 4K, 6K, 8K gold lead in these 3 games for Fnatic, and you put in Super instead of Noah, I think they would win the game. I'm being serious. Like, I actually could trust him to carry the game and not make, like, some stupid blunder and just throw the whole thing. What did you think on that aspect? Because I don't want to make it totally hating on him, because you don't want to take that for this episode. I guess it's not your style. But he had a lot of bad players in this final, right?
Yeah, I mean the one that definitely comes to mind is the part where he eats forward on under the corky, right? And he tries to get the chunk in, and uh if I'm looking at it from a team perspective, it looks like a tragedy of miscommunication. Okay. Okay, that there is 2 layers to this. Firstly, even if the Renekton commits the flashing goes in with him, I still think it's a bad play, right? Maybe he trades himself for the corky, but then he and Renekton are in a compromised position from that spot.
Right.
So it's probably not the right angle to go for. But what's more telling from that is that he and the rest of the team are not on the same page. And I think that this has been clear, like just watching the way that Fnatic has been team fighting, especially with Noah and Ezreal. It's very particularly on Ezreal, where I feel that he doesn't seem to get the concept of this champion in team fights, right? It always feels like he's either one bound too far behind or he's using the E2 too aggressively. I'm thinking about one where the team has full control of the choke and he's across the Dragon Wall in a position that's just needlessly too safe. And then once the fight breaks out, he's forced to E forward and then he gets picked off as a result of that. So it's one of those things where I feel that the team hasn't really drilled on how to really team fight with this champion. And that's where I feel that it's telling, right? Because it's on the same champion where he has repeatedly had his issues. Maybe it's one of those things where if to take it in a cynical way from the coaching perspective is okay, if we are not gonna understand how this champion works, I know that we have been having lots of success with it in the laning phase. Maybe we just drop it, right?
Yep.
I get that Astro is one of the strongest champions in the game right now, especially with the strategy of batting 380 carries.
I mean, the
Right.
joke is you should probably just let Caps play it, you know, since we can play it mid as well. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can also do that, right? Because by the way,
So
one thing, it's like more of a philosophical coaching thing, but maybe you'll vibe with it, is one thing that comes from the world of coaching, how you model the game, how you think about it when you're in different perspectives, is I feel like there's 2 obvious angles I would say to Fnatic here that would really help them as a coaching lens to apply. So one, when they had all these leads, there's a concept that I actually took from a guy called DDK in Counter-Strike, if you know him. He's a British commentator who's the colour commentator, etc. And he phrased it the best way possible, which is when you're in a winning situation, apparently this is what people do in like games like chess, etc. What you do is when you're in a winning situation, one thing you should do is you do a quick like sort of assessment of the situation in the game, and you ask yourself very quickly, what would be the most obvious way I could lose from this situation? And then you're just cognizant of the fact, so for example, if you have a certain lead, like we were talking about BDS, then it might be like, don't get caught in the side lane. If we can just keep playing this out with this lead, I can only go a little bit in, don't every now and then just give up a wave if I need to, just so I don't take that risk element. Essentially, something like that. You think that, because because, by the way, if someone like Humanoid and Fnatic had thought about that in this final, they could have actually avoided getting picked off a few times. And if they'd have known the goal lead they didn't need to even risk that. That risk gave the way back in to G2. And then the point I would say to Noah is a very simple one, which is this. I would say, bro, think about when you play against an Ezreal. It's the most annoying ADC champion, isn't it? You can never catch it. It's always dodging away, flash away, get away. Like, it could do the ult from halfway across the screen. The most frustrating thing about Ezreal is you can never get on top of him. So, bro, if you're playing and you're Eing in and you're melee range and people are still, you're doing it wrong. Like, bro, that you're playing, that's the dream when you're playing against the Ezreal, that he gives you himself. He just gives you a chance at free CC or to just kill him and blow him up. Normally that's the nightmare of playing. Like, if you think, like I'm saying, like of a classic Reckless game, the frustration of playing a Reckless is you feel like you're fucking Dal Sim from Street Fighter. You're stretching your arm all the way out and you can never quite get there. He's always just kiting backwards right at the edge of your reach. Like, you're not doing that. You're actually playing into their hands if you're Noah in this situation. Like, that's why I do feel like people have got to stop looking at win rates of champions and look at the kit. Like, what does it do? Like, in this scenario, there's something wrong if you're getting caught like this, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's as an AD carry, you definitely feel, especially when you have that much goal in your hands, you definitely feel the pressure of, I can outdeal this guy. If I go in there, I land the full combo, maybe I one-shot the Corki.
Sure.
And then that wins my game, the team fight, right? So it's one thing to try to play passively, and is also probably a reflection of the state of the mind of the team. How panicked are they, or is this something where he has a composure issue, right? It could be a factor of things here. So if it is a composure issue from his perspective, then what you say definitely does apply. But if it feels that the team is generally feeling very panicked, it feels that that especially because it's game 3 and you're already thrown twice at that point, right? You're going to game 3. It feels that whatever plays on side lanes are just getting shut down. We're losing in fights. It's the pressure. The pressure gets to you. Right, everybody's been calling you a joker. This is my turn. It's my time to shine. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna one-shot Caps. I'm gonna take down the #1 man, and I'm gonna prove all the haters wrong.
Right. That was the movie moment. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
That was basically the joke. Is that was Noah at the end of the Karate Kid, like. But then in this analogy, like I'm the secret coach, I'm the evil coach of the Cobra Kai, and I just tell Johnny, like, Johnny, what's the one way he could lose? As if that kid with the injured leg did the crane kick. So in my analogy, Thorin's special director's cut of Karate Kid, right? In my director's cut, they have a timeout, like, whoa, timeout. And he goes over, and then the Cobra Kai just listen, don't let him do the crane kick. So when he does the crane kick, we just run up, sweep the leg, stomp his fucking head, and that's it. The Karate Kid ends, and in my version, Johnny, aka I don't know, fucking Noah in this case. We win by just fucking record. I don't know. Come on, what was your point?
I mean, that's just where it is, right? It's a big finals moment. He tries to go for it. So to play defense for him a little bit there, that's problem.
By the way, what you're saying is a real factor. Like, one of the problems fans don't know is, just like people like me eventually sometimes become part of the feedback loop of what a player does and trying to prove you wrong. Definitely fan backlash does. And by the way, you've seen from Noah's tweets, he clearly does read all that shit and get bothered by it. I know what you mean. Like, basically, it's a really famous thing that actually sometimes people, like the aforementioned Reckless, sometimes if people just tell them 24/7, you play for KDA and you play safe, they'll have one game where they almost try to prove the opposite and, like, I don't know, play vain and like tumble into the enemy just to show, like, hey, I was doing the opposite. Even though I do think, by the way, that's another coaching concept. In theory, you don't want your players to be doing that, though. You don't want some bullshit that people said on Twitter to change what you're going to do in the game. Like, bro, play your game. I would even say that to Noah. Don't fucking listen to people on Twitter. If you really think something's best, you do it. Now, look, if they're wrong, you should be fired, but you should at least play your game. Don't do things to try and prove haters wrong. What the fuck is that? It's nonsense, right? All right, I've got another topic for you. Here's a topic. So you referenced it earlier with Mikyx. Bro, being as Mikyx has won these 3 splits in a row, aside from the first split this year, I think he's had some mad sketchy games, including in finals, by the way. Like, I think the last finals he was fucking atrocious in. He was having some really bad laning phases, obviously, in this game, which is mad, because if you think about it, historically, Mikyx probably one of the best laning supports ever in the West. Like, he's unbelievably good. He's exactly the player you want, like Hylissang, to go put that kill pressure on early on, to do, like, the Pyke level 2 bullshit, where they're just fucking you around in lane, they have you under tower, catching you out. Like, normally, this guy tortures you in the lane. So one thing, though, I have to say is this. I think people actually, for me, Jensen, go too hard on him, though. Because I've noticed in all these bad games over these last two splits, it's not just when he plays Poppy, because with Poppy, it's obvious. He is fucking amazing at landing that ultimate. Like, he's one of those players that makes me realise people do actually undervalue how strong kits are in League of Legends. They look too much at win rate. Because champions like Poppy, if you have a player like Mikyx that can reliably knock a carry out of a fight like that, it doesn't matter that it's on the support. It doesn't need to be, it's not like a top lane pot. It doesn't need to be strong. It doesn't have to do anything except that one ability. That one ability can get you a 5v4. So there is obviously every Poppy game he has, he's always going to have that chance. But I think that in a way actually is also the strength of Mikyx. I'll give you the analogy, Jensen. One of the reasons why I've never truly given up on Perks, no matter what his laning phase was like, no matter what his champion pool was like, no matter what team he played on, is I still do think to almost the bitter end, even if Perks had a shit laning phase or got solo killed or didn't look like he was fed, he would always look for some like mad game-winning angle at like 20 minutes into the game. Like he would look for a crazy flank, or he'd go to Fog of War and just gamble that he can go with his jungler and try and attack. So he would always try essentially like a really like create, you know, like what's it called? Like necessity is the mother of invention. It was like when he was in a tough spot, he was painted into the corner, he would do like the brilliant like creative move that could maybe still win you the game, which by the way is an area I think actually the majority of Western players are trashing. They're really bad at that. Then that's not what they do at all. They like it, they almost want it to be an Asian style. They want it to just be a rope style of play. You just do the same things. When you're ahead, you get the same item, you just go for the same thing, you get the Baron, you end the game. They don't know how to play from behind. And I always thought one of the reasons why his teams, especially the old GT, was amazing, it's because Perks has that quality. Dude, I think Mikyx actually has that quality. Because as you say, bro, he can have a shit laning phase, he can be behind in kills, the other team can be fed. But it feels like in the mid-game, especially when they move out of lane, there's so many times people even say he's like inting, but magically that turns into a catch for G2, or he does some mad flash play, or obviously he's another hook champion master who can just win you a fight out of nowhere. I think that part's actually underrated about his game, mate. He clearly has some sort of like weird poise later in the game where he knows he can still sort of do something useful. Because I don't think that's an underrated coaching concept. It's classically what you tell the top laner if they feed in lane. It's like, the game's not over because you fed. Like, be useful in the team fight, or be, you know, like build tank, for example. Like, all you have to do is think, I can't carry, but how can I help the other people? Okay, if you think that's a really powerful... I feel like Mikyx has got that nailed, man. I feel like even in the bad games, he can sometimes sort of pull one little moment that potentially wins you the game. What do you think?
It's no secret that whatever team that Mikyx is on, that mid game and the way that they called it around the map and even find fights is it's definitely elevator, right? And I remember during the pandemic, during the heyday of when chess was just on everybody's algorithms and their feeds and
Right.
socials, right? There was like this tournament going on, and somebody asked Magnus Carlsen, like, how does he feel about, or how does he prepare for these younger players who are using all these engines to prep for him and everything? And he says that, oh, I don't really care about the prep. I just go in and I play for very tactically rich mid games, right? I'm not sure if it was Magnus Carlsen or somebody
Oh, I
else,
get the
right? But
gist.
yeah, so the entire idea is that you want to play complex scenarios that some of these people who are like trying to piece things together, trying to figure out what the mid game is, and it's like I was bred in it. I was born in it.
Okay.
I beat T1 with this, right?
Sure.
And that's the whole thing that Mickey X has, right? Where is the whole like laning phase is fake, draft is fake, all these ideas of like champion win rates, like throw it out the window, right? Let's get dirty, let's get scrappy. I can be playing ultimate bravery, and my understanding of the game is just 2 levels, 3 levels deeper than you, where is this scenario and I'm gonna catch you in this position because I know that your protocols are missing in this case, right? And that's exactly what G2 demonstrated, right? I think that one of the very key examples of this is when Fnatic, they didn't extend and push an additional wave. They had a very sloppy set of resets. They caught somebody else off with a Kaiser W, and then all of a sudden the rest of G2's flashing on the two players of Fnatic who didn't recall, and then that just immediately just reset. That was the beginning of the turnaround in game three, right? Where they had the fight on the bottom side of the jungle, and then they got the caught or they got the catch onto Jun and Noah, I believe, with the Kai'Sa, and then I think it was Mikyx, so it was like Yike flashing onto them. And it's things like that. It's just experience, right? It's experience that tells you that this is the angle to go for. It's not like, oh lol, we stopped their reset. Okay, that's nice. Maybe we can be faster on the map. It's like they know that this is exactly the moment to go for because they identified that Fnatic were resetting on the wrong timer.
Yes. Another thing as well I want to get into is one thing I've found really interesting over the last few years, Jensen, is from doing reflections with big name LEC players. There's like a whole angle everyone's missing when we evaluate ADCs, but the ADCs themselves are really aware of this, which is, believe it or not, most people, I think, when they talk about ADCs, just are actually thinking the old way of League of Legends. They're thinking like, is he good in lane? Because basically you watch the lane for the first like 10 plus minutes of the game. So they look at that. And so what they do is they tend to slightly overrate the people who clearly focus on and really like to lane really well and go for the kills and the kill pressure and bully you. So for example, the actual person who really made me aware of this and like crystallized this thought was when I interviewed Kazi. And I asked him that year when he won those 2 LEC titles in 2021, was it when a lot of people like me actually used to flame him? Because if you watched him in laning phase, you were like, this guy's not only not anything special, bro, he sometimes just dies randomly. The fuck? Because I'm used to ADC being that role from the old days where you put all and every resource you invest in the ADC is like an investment. Like that has to pay off one day. I need to actually get my like payout. And if I put my resource in you, my ganks, my fucking gold funnel, I tell the support not to roam and stay in lane, then I need you to be ready to carry this fight at the end of the game. That wasn't just to get you through laning phase. That's not some like toxic top lane, like jungler ganks so I can win my lane. Like no, this is to like make you powerful to the team fight. So I always thought laning was actually like undervalued by some people. But we've gone too far the other way now, because what Kazi pointed out was, yeah, he'd totally agree that in lane, like Hans Sama and Upset were better than him. But his point was, if you put them both into like a late game scenario, he thinks they're, because their strengths, things like laning, they wouldn't be as good then, actually. And I actually think, you can see where I'm going, so I referenced Hans Sama. Dude, I think that has absolutely played out. Like, one weird thing I say about Hans Sama is, people don't talk about his style. They just make it sound like he's like the best ADC, or he's one of the best. He's clearly a very defined style of player. Like, when I interviewed people who played, like Trimby, who played with him, they said, like, he is a guy who his philosophy is that you win the lane and win the game. Like, he wants the game to be over 20 minutes in, because he wants to have gotten so many kills and so many items and so much pressure from the bot wave that, like, you can end the game. And the reason why I bring that up is, remember last year before MSI, that was what G2 was amazing at, when they had those Braum, like Aphelios Braum, I think, bot lanes. Like, they were unbeatable. Like, you couldn't do, that lane would just run over you, and the game would be over 20 minutes in. Now, look, it was also over because, like, you got a bot lane lead, your jungler was really strong, you had 3 winning lanes, and you had Caps. So you did have the ultimate way to, like, it's like if you were like pushing the door closed, like Caps is like the deadlock at that point. He's just locking, it's over. Like, it's at that point, we don't need to worry about this. So I will say there's that angle, but I think what you see in these last few finals, I also think Hans Sama's had some pretty sketchy games, bro, because like you saw in this final, when he doesn't get those lane leads, he's a different player. He's not, to me, he's not like as dangerous. I'm not as worried about Hans Sama. Like, I don't think if I'm Fnatic, I watch this final and I go, fuck, Hans Sama's just too good, bro. We can't beat him. Like, he was right there for the taking for me. I actually think he's sort of revealed a little weakness of his. He's just lucky, though, by the way, like a lot of G2 players in this final, that he plays in a team that's so fucking strong around the whole squad. They can make up for each other's flaws. They're not that team where they have the one carry, and if he doesn't carry, you look shit and then you lose the game. Like, they can win even when people play badly. What do you think of Hans Sama, where he's at?
It's really hard to judge because if I look at the key moments, Hantamo was good, right? But it's one of those where reviewing G2 in this series was a very mixed bag because the laning phase was definitely atrocious. And I think that the mid game was middling. But when G2 needed to turn it on, they did it.
That's true.
Right? The key fights where they found the weaknesses, they went in, he punished accordingly. He did his job for a large part of it. And when your protocols are superior over your opponents by such a large margin as G2 does over the whole LEC, then you don't really have to be a fantastic player. You just need to be able to do your job in this case. So if we are talking about trying to project how is Hansama going to look against the rest of the Asian teams, I will have to say this series is definitely a very large cause for concern, right?
Yep.
But is this going to be the final marker? It's not. We still have the whole playoffs. What did they call it now?
Season finals.
The season finals, right? The season finals to play out, and hopefully, we can get a. I don't really know if we're gonna get anything more out of G2 with what the rest of the LEC has to offer against them, right? Maybe BDS. I hope it's BDS versus G2 finals. And in fact, I thought that the most interesting games that came from this entire summer playoffs were the BDS games, right? BDS against KCAR, BDS against G2.
Yes.
But that's where the interesting games are happening because the others were more or less G2 outclassing people or people not really having their ducks lined up in a row.
Yeah, by the way, one last thing to say on the final. I do think there's one sense in which people are being unfair, which is when they say things like apparently it's what Cage even said on his core streaming game. That apparently some people even did say this game is unthrowable. Like, you can't lose from it. I will say they are acting in one area in a flawed manner, which is they're acting like if Fnatic did exactly the same things, they would lose to any team. I think only G2 would have caught these throws as well. That's the other part that I think is unfair. If you do, you have to add that to the sentence. You know what I mean? Like, Fnatic could have done the same stuff probably even against BDS and they would have won. You know, like I know what you mean by what you say about Hansard. At the end of the day, you still have to give them credit for actually doing what they did do, though. I always say this: throwing a game doesn't actually mean you lose the game. Catching the game is sometimes harder than people realize. Not every catch is easy. Just because you see a throw doesn't mean you automatically do the right thing. So yeah, it's true. You have to give G2 full marks for how they did actually then do what they did to counter those throws.
There's a lot of brilliant things. There's a lot of brilliant things that G2 was doing. The map movement, the way they're overloading the defense sites, their ability to identify that these were the wrong reset timings, their ability to identify that this is Oscar, he's trying to sync the wave, we're going to pick him off, and this is how we're going to reset the map to a neutral position. And then once they got into those positions, they were able to then even out the game and find contests on the Fnatic and in decent positions approaching those neutral objectives. Those are things that are not. I would be hard pressed to find a Western team through the history of Western League of Legends that can do what G2 is doing today.
Right, I said earlier we'll do this later, so let's do it now. Obviously, the other team that did play was Karmine Corp. Wasn't that long ago? They had the series against BDS, 5 games. It was a really back and forth series. Actually, by the way, it actually was a really good series. That was actually probably the best series in the playoffs. And as I actually alluded to on all my other shows, the real bummer of the format of LEC is obviously Karmine Corp had to win that series, if you don't know, to get to the season finals. So they're not going to be at the season finals. But the saddest thing is they're actually looking like one of the better teams right before the season ends. So if you were to like vote for a team that you had as like a wild card, like they do in tennis, to go to the tour, you'd vote this team. Like by the end, they actually were sort of like they weren't like really good, but they weren't bad. That was the key thing. And crucially for me, I always do this thing at the outset about Karmine Corp, which is I try to delete the past squads. As in, I'll talk about how Upset and Targamas played in the other lineups, but I don't actually know what the point of talking about the other top side. As though, like, you know, when people do, like, Karmine Corp's way better than no, they've changed literally like 60% of the team, guys. Like, those players aren't there. So, yeah, those players' idiosyncratic problems disappeared. Like, and you see the players they brought in, like, the Vladdy guy actually does have real potential. He does rig games. The other two, even though they were cynical pickups, I can see why they did it, Jensen, because both of those players, Cannon and Closer, clearly they're not coming in to resurrect their whole career and be top players. They're coming in to be an extremely obvious known quantity and do exactly the job they're told to do. But bro, this just shows why band-aiding is a real concept, guys. Because when you tell those guys, kinda just do exactly what you've done your whole career. Closer, your job is just to do these gags. It works. Like, actually, that structure sort of allowed then people like Vladdy and Up to actually carry some games. Like, that's the problem. When I talked about Upset with the past lineups is, I'll agree, in, like, Winter Split, some of the games in spring, there were some times where he didn't play out, like, he had leads himself. Like, he was in the no position. He would have a few kills. He'd be in the mid-game. He wouldn't close it out. Even so, though, he had a terrible top side of the map for my money. If you look now, when you actually have the tools to, like, do something, this looks like a totally different squad. Like, I was sort of vibing with this squad by the end. In fact, it's why I was so shocked. Like, people on Reddit were like hating on both Karmine Corp, and especially Upset. They were sort of saying he like blew the game or whatever. I actually thought this was very well played. What are your thoughts on the Karmine Corp side?
This is a very good revival of the whole Karmine Corp, right? But I think it's just very unfortunate that this summer split is not only going to be a footnote as to what people are going to remember Karmine Corp this year for, right? Which is what would unfortunately be the first half of the year. And the fact that they never made it to the season finals is going to be one of the big what ifs, because I think that this summer finals, I think is going to be, sorry, not the summer finals, the season finals is I don't see an upset happening, right? I don't see an upset happening, and it's a shame because I think that there's only one team that had a chance of upsetting either BDS, Fnatic, or G2, right? Fnatic, in terms of they're just going to crush the other teams in terms of player quality, in terms of protocols. BDS and G2 are just above everybody else. So I don't really see any of these other teams being able to challenge them unless Karmine Corp was there, right? And I definitely agree. Like, having Kana, having Closer, that brings a certain level of quality to the team. I think that they definitely had a very clear identity in terms of how they wanted to play. They definitely put the team together as well and were able to execute to a certain degree around that. Definitely in terms of the protocols, in terms of how they executed on dual lanes to extend leads. Not exactly full marks in the category, but it's a good enough, right? It's good enough. and they are able to then coherently put together something that can team fight around objectives, and then pressure leads accordingly to the close games, be it from a 1-3-1 or using Baron to then close out accordingly from such a position. So I felt that this Carmine Corp was one of those. It's a wild card out there, right? They have the quality to contest. They are decently coherent, so there was hope for them. And it's a shame that they didn't make the season finals.
The only actual like upside to the run they had in the end, bearing in mind they didn't make it, like I'm taking aside the Vladdy topic because I'm actually pretty certain if you look at the order of how they brought, they're clearly going to build around the Vladdy guy. He's going to be here next year. That just seems like an obvious move to me. But people know the rumor is like Upset probably was never going to get to stay no matter what because they've got the Calist guy and they've clearly been grooming him to be an LEC player. And it's obvious that he's sort of next on that train of Sakan and Cabo that they're telling like if you wait, you know, don't go to another team. We'll take. I'm speculating here, but this is what I've heard behind the scenes. Don't go to another team. We'll bring you up and put you in the LEC squad and you'll get your time to play basically. The reason why I bring that up is because the one upside for me, because I'm a fan of Upset's game, I think he is actually one of the best LEC players to never win a title. He'd probably be top of that list if people don't know. Is if you look at this guy's year, it was looking so bad early on. Even though I always point out, it's actually spring that was the worst one for him. In winter, he actually had a bunch of games where he would get the lead early, or they'd win in late, or they'd get a couple of kills. They had a non-existent mid game in LEC for some reason. But this split, I think Upset had such a glow up. Like he actually might have a chance now to get picked up in the offseason and go to another squad. Like, if I had to guess, I don't think he'll have loads of offers because he has always had that baggage following him around of like, is he too demanding or do people think he's a diva or whatever? Even though, by the way, I'll tell you, he's got a fabulous work ethic. And if you actually ask people who've played as teammates of his, obviously I don't know about Adam, the ones that are reasonable, they'll all tell you, yeah, he's actually really good and like a lot of that's overblown. But I feel like if he'd have been where he was in spring or winter at the end of this year now, he actually might have like killed his career. He'd be in a position where like, I don't know that you're going to get many, like the offer you would get would be like for fucking Giant X or something stupid like that. You know what I mean? Like some not very good team. I actually feel like there's a chance that maybe he can actually get like sort of a call up now. Like if I think of some of the other teams in the league, I mean, even though people are going to think this is nonsense, dude, an obvious one to me would absolutely be Fnatic. It'd be like, come back, bro. Just come and play with us again. Like, think about the team we've got now. If we slot you in here with this Razork, and by the way, the Jun guy's not bad. Like, bro, we could fucking win the league. Like, I would be making that. So, if you're an Upset fan like I am, I actually think he sort of ended on a pretty good note. Like, I think people, you can see from that series the skill set. And like I say, I watched that series and I don't think, wow, he didn't win the game. I'm like, bro, if I just give him a better team, wouldn't this have been a series win? I think he would have won this series for himself. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think when it comes to player quality, Upset has definitely always been up there with the rest of in terms of who can contest with Asian players, right? Upset's definitely in the conversation. So I just remembered that there was a whole drama between Adam and Upset, and it makes me feel a little bit silly for bringing up that might be someone. I mean, that's part of what coaching is, right? You gotta have to bring players who might not seem that they're able to work together and get them to be able to work together. I think that that's definitely some contending pieces for them for them out there. It's unlikely that he's gonna stay on K Corp. Or maybe he does, right? But I think definitely Fnatic is definitely a potential destination.
Without
BDS
ruining
is also another
anything,
potential
let me just
destination.
say, let's just say I would guess he doesn't want to stay on Carmi Corp. Let's just put it that way, you know. Like.
Fair enough.
And I get the vibe maybe they also don't want him to stay, so it might be mutual in that sense, gents. Like, I feel like it's better for everyone if we just move on at this point in time, you know.
Yeah, but it's somebody who is looking for someone with the carry potential. If someone's trying to
Yes.
win the LEC, right? Then this is somebody that they look for.
Yeah.
Or unfortunately, with the current market that the esports is in, it might be one of those cases where he just ends up having too big of a price tag and he just ends up sitting out because some of these teams they just don't feel that they can contest G2 in the next year. So probably it's a few factors. What the G2 lineup looks like for 2025. Do any teams want to try to contest G2 for that title in the LEC? And does the team have the right team where they would then consider bringing Upset into that scenario? Right.
I mean, you were talking earlier, but like, I actually agree. An obvious one, even though sadly I don't think they will, because as I say, I think the coaching staff has a different perspective of what they want. I actually, if I'm BDS, this would be the move I would do, bro, because this is the move that for real could just make you the champion. Like, everything else can stay the same. And by the way, even though I know the other reason it would never happen in theory is Adam and Upset supposedly hate each other, blah, 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 blah. First of all, I trust the coaching staff. I think they could keep Adam reined in, as it were. And then also, I would just say this to Adam, bro, Like, your styles would even fucking work. Like, that whack shit that Monty used to do to, like, make it sound like Adam was doing it tactically. Like, you're going to be the pressure sponge up top to give Crownie space in the lane. Like, that's not really true, but it does work like that in principle. And I'll tell you what, someone like Upset would fucking love that. Remember, he literally has played with people who do that in top lane. That's their whole style. So I even think it would work. And then the other team, to me, no one mentions this team. I think this would be another obvious one. If you're thinking of a team that has pieces which would instantly get better with a carry, bro, how about Heretics? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with Flackhead, but the problem is he's not like the superstar carry, is he? So if you put this guy onto a team with Trimby and Yeko, like, this guy could cook. Again, with Wonders, he's already played Wonders top lane guys. Like, this guy could actually cook if he was on some of these squads, I feel like.
Man, I don't know where Heretics is gonna go, right?
No one does. No one does, mate.
This year, and
I mean, it's a bad sign that Peter Dunn's leaving, isn't it?
Blown
So, yeah, the whole team's almost certainly going to get destroyed, yeah. I also feel like their team, as if to show how poorly GM'd that squad was, I actually think if you look, no joke, almost every single player in that team can go somewhere else and be good. Almost all of them. It's just that together, it's just not a very well put together squad. It's why when I had Zabatine on, since he was the guy who did it, he agrees. I said it's a bit like when you made that Immortals team in LCS Pro, and you had all those really good players like Soaz and fucking Smithy, and they were all good players, but the problem was you had all the fucking facilitators, and you had no one for them to facilitate, so it didn't matter how good a move or how good a read they made. In this analogy, you had no knockout power. You could never actually win a game, so I think Heretics is the same thing, bro. Like, if you were people like Trimby and Yankos, you were in nightmare mode, mate. No matter how well you played, you could never win these games. Like, you had no carries. There's no carry. There's not a single player here that would be getting all LEC. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if we were to look back at the LEC, Vitality and Team Heretics, these are the big two what if rosters, right?
Yes.
If people are going to be more than the current state of the LEC, why is it that Fnatic is getting away with this? Why is it that BDS is getting away with this? Is because two teams just completely dropped the ball, right? Rogue, they had no aspirations. It showed in the budget. It showed in the GMing. But the two ones is like they did the Last Dance thing. Vitality just has to be cursed at this point as an organization.
Does seem like it, doesn't it?
It's very. Yep.
Because, dude, what they have that I've never seen before, it's one thing to just make bad rosters. Bro, they make bad rosters with good players, though. That's what's so crazy. Like, dude, if I even look at their roster now, my brain can't process that they were actually in last place, or second to last, or whatever. Like, I can't actually process it, bro. I keep looking at the roster now when it shouldn't be possible. Like, I'm not even joking. That lineup, remember, because the Linchas guy had all that hype with him. A lineup of Forton, Linchas, Vetio, Kazi, and Helisank should be minimum top 5. It shouldn't even be possible to be a bottom feeder, not even in that. That's actually insane. And I even like the coaching staff. They are just the most cursed org ever, mate. It's crazy at this point in time. I mean, if you want to know how cursed they are, think logically. You could actually argue the best lineup they've had in the last few years, just in terms of results, was that like one-off self-made leader one that like actually had that run in like summer like 3 years ago or something mad. Like they've had to, because if you look at just go to the Gamepedia guys and do that thing where you look at players joining. They're essentially like recruiting the all LEC teams for the last like 3 years. But when the players go there, they just die in for Vitality. Like it's like Vitality is where you go as an all LEC player to get paid, but not to have to be all LEC level and just fucking chill. Like, lol, I've already got my money. It's actually sad. It is. I agree with you though. It's why actually people are too harsh on both Fnatic and BDS. In a sane world, Fnatic isn't even supposed to be the auto number 2 team in the region. They haven't had that money in years, guys. At this point in time, they're sort of getting by on things like, do you want to play with Humanoid? It's things like that keep you coming now. So if you think about it, right, in a world where Vitality's lineup was awesome and Carmine Corp was great and Heretics built a great roster and Mad Lions kept their championship squad, Fnatic wouldn't even be getting flamed because they'd be like the 4th best team or something and no one would even hate on them. They'd actually be kind of like a cool dark horse. Same thing with BDS. Like BDS would be a really awesome 3rd or 4th best team. If they're not a contender, there's no reason to hate on them. The problem is, well, as you say, when we compare these teams to G2, we just look at the gap between them, but we ignore that they're kind of like boosted. The rest of the league being shit sort of boosted some of these squads, you know. All right, I've got one last question for you, but it's going to be like a meta-related one. So I want to get your take on this since we're not going to see you again for a while till the next split, which will be next year, obviously. So here's the question. I said it earlier, but I also think the reason why, like before, most people complain about things in the LEC, like I say, like the format. They don't like that you can have you split over after a few weeks, or they don't like things like you don't get much practice time between games. But I actually think for Summer Split, the biggest issue for me is, dude, Europeans can't fucking exist in this current meta. Like I say, this isn't even just the meta where we have like ADCs mid as well. Bro, there's metas where you have an ADC mid, but maybe you have a mage bot lane. You have ADC in ADC, you have ADC in mid, and then some people have ADC in top lane as well. Like, I have actually seen games with 5 ADCs in a game. And as you can imagine, think about in the history of League of Legends, this is one of those games that almost always has a tank in. That's one of the most vital roles in the game. The question in history is just where's the tank, top lane or fucking, usually top lane or jungle. Those are the 2 roles, obviously, right? EU somehow just can't survive a meta where there is no fucking, like, essentially, this is like the anti-tenacity meta, you know what I mean? Like, this is like everyone's just getting fucking their head bashed in, and the team fight is just like a bad gold game where everyone's just stood there auto-attacking like that till the health bar goes down. What do you think? I think actually this meta's made Europe look really bad as well, bro. Like, I don't think they've adapted. I've hated these Varus top picks. Oh, I hate it, mate. I hate some of these teams. There's even teams that have, like, the really strong AD carries mid and sometimes don't use them well. Like, what do you think of this meta? What are your thoughts?
It's hard to say, right? Because I think that there's a few factors here. Because this is a strange matter. Because it's the first time where usually you do Lucian and then you have to use it to enable something like Lilia, which is
Exactly.
trying to then create a big lead, right?
Yes.
But in this case, you're trying to funnel or you're trying to set up for a carry jungler, right? Lilia was never a true carry. You use Lilia to create a lead from which you then use your ultimate advantage to then win a fight, and that used to be the Lucian Lilia combo. Or you did something like Ornn Karthus, right? Which is something that happened back in the day. So this is the first time we're saying things like Corki, and it's very strange because the AD carries are the focal points in the mid lane rather than the AD carry mids facilitating an AP jungler. And at the same time, you have an AP jungler where they're so strong at the same time that they want to farm as well. So it's a very strange position, and I think that this is one of those areas where I still think that there's space for innovation in the current meta. And going for 380 carries is one of the possible answers, but I don't really see it, right? The Twisted Fate has lost like 5 games and won one in this playoff series in the LEC so far. And this is one of those things where it comes down to does this enable you to play a style that your team is comfortable playing, right? Where if you're looking at the SKs and the Fnatics, where they are about player quality and about playing exploitative League of Legends, then is this something that's good for you? Where to a certain degree, yes, right? If I'm going to be playing these DPS carries, and if I get them ahead by just having solid laning phases, if you then go into that straight up fight with me, my number is bigger than your number, I'm going to win the fight. But against some other teams, where if you now find yourself cornered in a draft where you're picking the Renekton and stuff like that, you don't get that stat multiplication that crit damage does usually give you, and you end up in these positions where you're not necessarily able to close out the games, right? I do believe that SK also ended up losing in playoffs because of on a Renekton pick, right? I'm not gonna say because of, but I do recall that there was a Renekton loss involved somewhere in there as well. So it's one of those things where it's really about winning the duels on the side lane, being able to set up the protocols to enable your side laner to then win those duels. Because that's one of the things I think is very key. If you have the Lucian that's ahead, is he able to then bully out the Corki to then continue to maintain the lead so that you're then able to rotate faster and create those manpower overloads. That's one factor that I'm thinking about. And I think that traditionally, not just Europe, but the West has not necessarily been the best at executing at that meta. But this is a very broad topic, right? And um I just think that it's not necessarily a meta thing, but just a game understanding thing that's going to determine the outcome of the LEC. But if you're talking about at an international level right now, definitely this is not going to be the most comfortable meta for the LEC. Playing things like Ashe and Varus has always been something that LEC has always been weak at in terms of executing in the bot lane. Something that the Asian teams, where they understand and are a lot more decisive around playing around mid lane with the ultimates, being very willing to flash on somebody when they know that they have the mid-lane advantage, although they have improved in terms of that. I think historically, metas like this have never been the strength of the LEC.
Right, obviously, that was not Dom, but I have a correction. I've just looked this up. I wasn't actually aware. The season finals last almost a month, guys. Like they end on like the 1st of September, bizarrely. So it's actually possible that Jensen might come on one more episode, because I think we're going to get like 4 more episodes of the show. So it's possible he might still be in the rotation. But obviously, this week he played the role of not Dom. Next week there will be a different not Dom. Not this not Dom, a different not Dom. But see who it is next week.